Well, thank you, everyone. It's great to be together, and it's fantastic to be able to join not only across the UK, but right across Europe. And it's a great privilege. Every December, actually, for the last few years, Scott Wilson has been our guest. And Scott's a good friend of Ground Level. And he's been based in Denmark for over 20 years. And for those that don't know him, he specializes in the whole area of coaching and training, particularly for leaders into churches. He's the president of EuroLead Net, which is a network of churches across Europe. And I'm hoping we'll hear a little bit about the picture of our European brothers and sisters today. He's also founder and director of the Institute for Creativity, Leadership and Management. Not a lot of people know that, so I think it's important that you know that. He has a brain, which is a wonderful capacity. He holds 2 master degrees, one in theology and the other in organizational development. Also holds a doctorate through the Liverpool University. And so we are privileged to have Scott connecting with us today. He's always stimulating, always challenging, and really useful to be able to hear the bigger picture of what is happening. And I'm really looking forward to hearing you, Scott, today. We welcome you, and let's give a big warm welcome to Scott Wilson. Thanks, Scott.
All right, can you hear me all right? Just wave if you can't, let me know. All good? Wave again. Perfect. Stuart and Irene, it was wonderful to see you. I'm sorry I'm not in Lincoln. I'm disappointed by that because you have the best cream buns down there in the world. I'm telling you right now. I found a little cafeteria that sells cream buns. Anyway, I must admit, not being present and having to do stuff like this is always difficult. And I know that you guys have been doing heaps of it and probably sick of it right now, but it's what you do. As Stuart, that was a great introduction, Stuart. Thank you for that. And because it's on record, I can get that and put it on my webpage. It was so inspiring. So I'm going to use it later on. But Paul and Jeannie as well are in the background there. Good to catch up with you guys. And all of you out there who I've got to meet over the many years or few years of coming, as Stuart rightly said, every December almost, it seems. It's like a bad coin turning up, isn't it? But every December there, and again this December. So thank you for that. And Stuart and Irene, I'm looking forward later on to catching up with you in more detail this afternoon. So that will be very exciting. But right now, let me get started on this message today. And we have time, as you understand or have heard, for those who are seniors, to get back into this as a discussion point, maybe next Wednesday. So if there's a bit of stuff in here that demands further questions, then so be it. Let's see where we go. This is so complicated for me because I can't read what's going on. You know, you use a lot of looking around the room, where eyes are going, where people are looking, what they're doing, how they're responding. All I've got is the little chat thing down below that comes up occasionally to read how it's going in the room. So today I'll just launch out, and if I get into any problems, then Paul and Stuart and Irene can pick it up. They can sort it out. That sounds like the right thing to do. Anyway, the team behind all of this, Steph and Jason and the others, have set me up well, so I think we're ready to go with notes and everything like this. This message today, as you saw, is just a simple idea that my ace trumps your king. And I like the word trump, and I put it in there not because of the political reason, but because of what it actually means. If you have an ace and you play a king, and of course I know that ground level people don't play cards. This is a very bad thing for you guys. I realize that, but so I've used 2 examples already today that are not in your world. But you put down your ace and you say my ace trumps your king, and I want to bring it into the environment we're currently in, the thing we're dealing with at the moment, which is quite special, this Corona time. So there's a few stories and ideas that are going to circulate here today around that time with that issue. And I hope this helps you as well, understanding where I'm going. But this time has meant a lot of things for the church. It's meant, like we've already heard people pray and say, where does it go? What does it look like in the future? And so on. And mapping out almost week by week, actually, what we can do in terms of regulations. We've got a lot better here in Denmark. Church has been running since June 15 with small regulations. We still go shopping, we go out and eat and so on. So you guys are really in the UK under a different climate there. It's a little easier here. But one thing has happened is, of course, is we have had to shut down coming together. And I was talking to my Australian mates who have had it worse in many ways than we have in some states. I mean, we're talking absolute severe shutdowns for months. And I rang up my mate and I said down there, he's a leader of a movement down there. And I said, what are you guys doing to respond to the need at the moment in terms of contacting MPs and trying to get things moving? I do realize we've got a pandemic, but at the same time, we've got to keep true to what we do, which is gathering. In many ways, we are an essential service that way. And I noticed in Britain, actually, you guys have done a lot more with this in terms of, putting up what could you say, a document or idea on how churches are essential and even taking this to high levels. They hadn't done that in Australia. And all I got was really, well, not really much at all. So I rang another friend and said, what's going on in Australia? And he said this to me. He said, our pastors in Australia, not in England, in Australia, are very good at inspiration, but not very good at getting people to think. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting line, which is why my first point is this: marination trumps inspiration, or marination is over inspiration. Inspiration means basically to say something, to provide an environment, to encourage people to be able to do more with their life. You inspire them. It's that word to breathe out, isn't it? When you breathe out something, it's a scripture word, actually. The inspired word of God, the breath of God breathes out. So it's a great word. But, we can inspire so much that we forget to get people to think, to marinate. I found two amazing words in that I'm using in the COVID time. Marination, to soak something in a flavor. You do that when you grill. You take your steak, you put it in some oils and spices, you leave it there for 8 or 9 hours, you put it on the grill, and when you get it back, it's got the flavor of that juice you soaked it in. Another one's percolation. Percolation is where things just bubble away. Marination, percolation. I like those two ideas. When you think about it, one of the things we've got to make sure is we, in this time, or as we enter the next phase, is we train people how to think through what's going on. And I'll tell you why, because some of the stories I've heard from around Europe, ladies and gentlemen, are frightening stories. They are stories where people have been led more by fear than right thinking. You might even say faith. But this idea of I had a pastor ring me recently in Europe, and he said, we had a couple in our church who rang him and said to him, we're not coming back to church to meet or together until there's a vaccine. When the vaccine comes and everything's safe, we're going to come out and come back to church. And the pastor said, well, I hope you've thought about that. What does that mean for your children? What does that mean for your family? Why don't you come out sometimes and things like this? And they said, you don't seem to understand what we're saying. This, by the way, goes back August. We are locking down everything in our home. Our children will not be going out. We'll not be meeting with the neighbors. We're working from home. We're having our food delivered. We are not going anywhere till there's a vaccine. Almost like the vaccine is the magic bullet now, which makes no sense either. And you sort of think about that and you wonder, why aren't these people thinking stuff through? Why aren't they working it out? Are they going so driven by what they feel or they're experiencing that we haven't taught them to think some things through? And in this time, we've got a lot of things to think about. We need to help people, not only through inspiration, but getting them to think the right thoughts, to getting them to process what's happening around about them. Because let's be honest, guys, when you read the media today, it is primarily narrative and the data is being misused. In many ways, you have to find out the data for yourself, dig down and find out what it all means. And you have to think for yourself. I think one of the things we're going to have to come back to when we come out of this time is another fresh look at discipleship. We're going to have a look at that. And discipleship, in my opinion, is two things. First of all, it's always a confrontation. And secondly, it's always about how we think. We do link the process of heart to that. But what happens when you become a Christian is your heart is transformed, but your thinking's still left behind. So discipleship is that time where we radically address the thinking patterns of a person with a changed heart. Also, it's a confrontation. Jesus was constantly confronting. And if we don't have, there's levels of confrontation, but he did very severe confrontations and sometimes very simple confrontations. For example, the best confrontation we can have now, if you want to use that word, is to ask a question. If you ask a question, you find out where somebody got the idea from. So if you have somebody who rings you and says, I'm not coming out of my house till the vaccine comes, my next question might be, okay, what does that mean for you and your children? Okay, how did you arrive at that point? What we've tended to do right now when we're getting these corona decisions, as I call them, corona decisions from team, from leaders who are saying, I'm not doing this anymore, I'm dropping out of that, I feel I need time to reflect on this. We're just going, okay, I understand it's that sort of season. Actually, what we should do is come in with some questions and learn to question from all angles where that thought, idea, decision even came from. If we're willing to do that, I think what we do is raise the bar to not just inspiring people to come back to what we do, but rather getting them to think about what we do and causing them to really work out what they are doing. Now, you Brits over there, for you might be really just, heck, this is nothing to us. We always think, well, we're good at thinking over here. Well, come and live where I live, where we live in Europe. And I'm sorry, some of the stories just shocked me because it seems like nobody's actually sat down and thought about how did I get here? This idea of this decision, by the way, on that decisions, I wrote this book. This book was written, produced, printed, and arrived the first week of Corona. Isn't that exciting? The first week of Corona, my new book comes out called The Will of God, or How God Works in the World. So I'm assuming I'm having to test the theory of the title of the book right now. But I've got thousands of them sitting in my garage right now that came from there. And the idea was, it's the one I've always wanted to write. I think we are a product of decisions. I think decisions are about how we think. I think that we have to examine some of the theologies of Scripture, which is what this book does, and should help us come to a great conclusion on how God works. So there's a website detail up there if you want to get hold of that, but that's another thing. So even decisions that people are making now, if they're coming out of feeling, coming out of fear, coming out of the wrong motivation, our job, I think, as leaders is not to inspire them or pastor them through them only, because there's something that trumps that, and that is teaching them how to think something through, teaching people to think differently. Creativity is a great, I heard Stuart pray it before about the idea of creativity at this time. And what a great moment we've had, I think, for creativity with our teams. Creativity comes from changing the way you think. We often associate creativity with a type of person or personality set. But actually, we're all designed to be creative because it's determined by how we think. So moving into that level of just getting people to think. Have you ever done a brainstorming session or something like this? And you've said to people, all right, I'm going to throw this line out, and I want you to feed back quickly to me some ideas. And the room goes silent. Now, it's usually because people can't think that fast and are not there to think that fast. Our job as leaders is not only to inspire them, it's to help them think through stuff so that actually our pastoral work is less in these times than more in these times, because they've learned how to work it out, for themselves. I hope you got that one, because marination trumps inspiration every time. I used the word over, actually. If you see on the notes, I use the word marination over inspiration because I know every time I use the word Trump, somebody's going to fall off their chair or just click off and I'll never see them again. But Trump is a great word for this, and it's in the Bible too. You can look that up in the New King James Version. Anyway, let's go on. Here's the next one. Kingdom principles trump personal preference. Kingdom principles trump personal preference. What I'm finding, maybe you are too, that there's a lot of people today making decisions based on personal preference rather than what the kingdom states. I'm finding that people are almost believing their personal preference is sort of the word of God to them, or can I just say this, possibly their kingdom value, which I find rather scary. The interesting thing about this is that personal preference, if you examine it, pastors, probably anyone that's left your church in the space and time you've been running a church, almost every single occasion has been a personal preference rather than a kingdom value issue. The music's too loud. You preach too long. I don't like this. I don't like that. You changed the color on the wall. You moved my seat, whatever. And it's all personal preference. And so often what's happened is people have made personal preference in this time more relevant, more powerful than kingdom principles. Let's take gathering. Now, the idea of gathering, now take this Zoom type thing here. We're talking, it's funny because we're talking about this being the new normal and all of this sort of thing. And interestingly, last year I was with Kerry Newhoff at a seminar in America, and he was talking, you might have heard of him, he's a Canadian church consultant. He was talking about in the future, everyone will work from home. And that was summer 2019. Nobody really, thought about it being important then. And then March hit, we had our lockdown and everybody had to work from home on Zoom. And everybody said, this is the new normal. By about August, we said, nah, not really, not interested, nah, going to do something else. And I'll tell you why, because as my daughter calls it in her world, it's called office gossip, and lots of things are sold by office gossip. That is walking around, talking to somebody at the coffee bar, having a chat to someone. Now it's a Zoom meeting set for 3 days in advance for 10 minutes, and it's slowing everything down. She's in the food supply chain industry and food chain industry, and she says just slowing everything down now because we haven't got this gathering going on. Let me help you with this one. Gathering is fundamental and a kingdom principle of the way the church operates and functions. I'm going to be bold here, challenging if you like. I don't believe there is any such thing as online church. You can have an online experience, you can have an online option, but you can't have online church. I learned that the easy way, really. I haven't done an online service in 6 months. Now, the reason for that is I've been able to go to church because, as I said before, we've been open. So we can go to church, and I've traveled a little bit over summer. But I went down to Amsterdam. I was doing some filming down there. And the guy said to me, can we do a sermon from you and put it on next Sunday as part of our service? And I said, well, you can go ahead. We recorded it next Saturday. They sent me a link. On the Sunday morning, they sent me a link and said, hey, you're on now. Do you want to watch this service at 10 o'clock? I thought, heck, I've never done one. I'm going to do it. And it's me talking. I've got a face for radio, but I reckon it'll work out. So I set to be fair, I was working around in a T-shirt and a pair of underpants. In my house, I can do that. The neighbors can't see in. I'm okay with this. And I wasn't dressed for church, shall I say that. And I went outside. It was a sunny day. I put the phone on the table and they started off with their music. And, I'd heard it 100 times. So I went and made a cup of coffee and I'm listening, got my earbuds in. So I'm listening. And then I come back and they're doing the emceeing and the offering and all the rest. And I looked over and I literally, with my earbuds on, went and chopped some of the hedge down. I used hedge clippers and chopped the hedge. And then they said, now we've got Scott Wilson coming to speak. I ran over with my coffee, put my feet on the table, started to watch myself and thought, God, this guy is so boring. There must be somebody else I can listen to. And within about 10 minutes, I was like, I'm out of here. Can't do this anymore. And then I thought to myself, this is what everybody's doing when we do online church. They're cleaning their house. They're looking after the kids. They're feeding the dog. They're washing the dishes. They're cutting the grass. But I was in church, Pastor. Oh, yes, I was. I was watching online church. I would have a cardboard cut out of myself and just put it there and walk away and do something else. Anyway, my point being, Church is gathering. It's not an option. It's not even personal preference. It is fundamental, Acts chapter 2 and 3, to the life of what the church is. Tell a persecuted Christian in some persecuted land that they can now do church on Zoom. And they'll look at you and go, what? They pay a heavy price to gather. We have a conference every year. Some of you guys have been to it. I know Paul and Jenny have, and we had a guy meant to come from Nigeria to come and speak to us. He works in the top part of the Muslim area in Nigeria, and his church pays a heavy price every Sunday to meet because they can be, all sorts of things can go wrong. They're under threat every Sunday they meet. And he was locked down during Corona. And we talked about this. Well, you've got Zoom, you're doing, and we said, well, you know, can this help you in the future with church? And he just looked at the camera and said, there is no way we would not gather. We will gather. Now, under the circumstances we're under, we can't do that because of the infectious disease they say we are having to deal with. So gathering is a bit different, but we do have rules and regulations we can abide by. And I don't think we have a personal preference of, I just want to opt out of that. If the personal preference is led by fear or it's led by misunderstanding, then we're not teaching people to think and work it through. We have to counter that with a very strong idea or concept of what it means to gather as a kingdom principle. When I was about 28 years old, I went to work in a place called Brunei. Now, if you know where Brunei's tacked on to Malaysia, it's a population about 40,000, and the Sultan of Brunei is probably the wealthiest man in the world. I didn't know this, but I was going into a fully Muslim country, very restricted. But I got a letter from the Archbishop of Brunei that I was allowed to come in, and got to the border, went through the border, and the pastor met me at some guy met me at across the border there in Brunei. And you got to remember, this is a country where when you have a crossroads on the sign, they bend the cross over because the cross is so offensive. They have 2 Olympic swimming pools that they built there, filled them with water, with a stadium, have never used them. I've seen these. I've got pictures of them. They have never used them because when the tilers put the tiles in, a Western company they put crosses where you swim in the tiles. So they refused to use these 2 full-size Olympic swimming pools. Now, this was a long time ago. They may be gone now, but I was shocked to see them sitting there, never used. Nobody's ever got in them. And so I get there, and while I get through the border, about 10 people come up and shake my hand and just walk off. I thought Brunei is such a welcoming country. And I said that to the person driving me. He said, no, that's not the country doing that. That's our prayer warriors praying you through the border. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you're not supposed to be here. And I said, what do you mean? I've got a letter. Yeah, but even with that letter, 80% of our guest speakers are turned away at the border. You can't get in. Okay, now I felt like I was the James Bond of the Pentecostal movement. This is exciting for a young 28-year-old guy. I'm thinking this is going to be cool. We'll drop you at the hotel. It was Saturday night. In the morning, you'll get a phone call. And you just do what you're told. So, okay, I go to the hotel. I get a phone call at 8 in the morning. Look out the window. You'll see a black Mercedes pass across the road. You go down there and get in the car. So I just did what I was told, got in the car, was driven to an urban area, sent into a large house. The guy walked up to me, the translator, and said, welcome. Well, it's great to have you here. We're looking forward to church today. I said, what do you mean church? There's nobody here. Oh, they'll be here in 5 minutes. Trust me. In about 5 minutes, 60 people, boom, into that building. And they did 2 songs. I preached, translated, bang, gone again. I said to the guy, I didn't even have time to sell my books. He said, no, we're going now to the next place. And I said, well, where's that? He said, we don't know. That's a phone call we make in the next 10 minutes. And then we find out where the next place is. I did that 5 times on Sunday at that period of time because it was illegal to gather, but they still did. Friends, there's some things that belong to the kingdom that you can't shake. You can't move over personal preference. You can't change them. They are what we are. And we have to be careful when people offer personal preference that, again, we use a confrontation of questions to figure out, is that really true? Is that right, what you're saying? Here's the next one. I got to get moving. Proaction trumps reaction. Proaction trumps or is over reaction. Now, reaction is what you do when you didn't know something was coming. You react. So in the first weeks of March, most of us probably reacted. You know, I did. You react with, what the heck is going on? We can't go anywhere. We can't do anything. What's this all about? So my nature is to examine it a little further. And I started digging into other things and finding out you can't follow the press in this stuff. You have to find out for yourself. And so I started to do a bit of that. But I reacted, I think, because I never experienced this before. Proaction means to think ahead and plan what you will do when you get there. Proaction is the ability to go way ahead and say, and by the way, 2021, can I help you with this one? 2020 is the year of COVID. 2021 will be the year of financial shaking. And it's the year we need to proact. And some of you doing budgets and things like now, I suggest you plan 3 scenarios with your team on what a budget may look like. That is a neutral one, flat plateau, 5% loss, then down to maybe an 18% loss. And actually, so when you get there, you're proactive and you're not reacting. I'm hoping all of us have a plus and it takes off and we boom again. That's our hope. But proaction says, look ahead. Now, in organizational terms, this idea of reaction proaction is what's known as loose tight. So, for example, if you have many multi-sites, you'll have what's called loose tight thinking. It's the multi-site has it loose in 20% of what they do, but 80% is tight. In other words, centrally run or whatever. And often when we do loose tight multi-sites, we're talking about what percentage is loose and what percentage is tight. So it's a term used in organizational thinking, and it's beyond what I've said, but it's an important idea, loose tight, because reaction is loose and proaction is tight. Well, during this time, this is the first time in 22 years I've been home in my house for 3 months non-stop. I'm usually on the road, I'm never here, and my wife gets used to me coming and going. So 3 months at home with my wife, we're still married, it's an amazing thing. But in the first 3 months, I was sent to the garden quite a lot. And when I got out to the garden, she tended to bolt most of the doors. So I didn't get in till it was really quite dark. But anyway, I spent a lot of time out there in the garden and, pulling weeds out of the grass and doing all the stuff, and everything was fine. What else could you do? Okay, some Zoom calls. They're exciting. I did a lot of Zoom calls too. Wow, I just couldn't wait for my next one. I can't wait to get back together again. And I'm hoping that next January I'm in Lincoln again getting a cream bun. Oh, and seeing Stuart and Irene and the boys and the team there. Anyway, so, I'm out there and I decided I've got 3 lawnmowers, okay, 3 lawnmowers. I've got a dirty, great big Honda thing that is about 18 inches across. And when you start that up, it's about 200,000 decibels. It's very loud. And I usually start that up early in the morning when the neighbor's baby has been crying all night, just to let them know we're here. And then I have a little electric one with a battery. I use that one when all the greenies walk past. I push a little battery and they think, isn't that guy? He's right on the ball, that one. And then I've got a proper clipping cylinder machine that does the clipping type, like a scissor. But I'm not happy with any of that. So I went and imported for myself, from the UK, I might add, a Cobra rotary wheeled rolling machine, cheaper than I could buy here. And I bought this thing, and it's genius. What it's done to my garden, have a look at this. I've got a picture for you. You're gonna love this. Some of you Brits will know this. Look at that there. See that there? That's what that sucker does. Isn't that amazing? That's a British cut there. I've learned now that is one thing to get those stripes like that, but getting them straight is another thing. I tell you what, my wife has complained to me now. She said, they're not straight. And it's like I wander off. I get sidetracked and wander off, and it sort of goes all over the place. Anyway, you can take the picture down now. I take this machine, and it's made in China, but it's imported from the UK. And I thought, well, I better wear gloves because it's probably got COVID all in it. You never know. The Chinese might be putting COVID on the lawnmowers. I don't know. I got it from the UK. I tipped the mower over and I had a look under the body of the machine. There was literally 36 screws under there, and where the blade goes. I'm like, who puts a screw under there where the blade goes? So I take a little Phillips head out and I'm doing them. Every single screw was loose. Not one of them was tight. Some of them needed a whole turn. And I thought, isn't this amazing? In the 7th cut of cutting my grass, one of those screws could drop out, hit the blade, fire off through a window, hit a kid, hit my leg, So the Chinese don't even get us with COVID. They get us with loose screws and lawnmowers. It's a tricky deal out there, I'm telling you. And so I went down and I tightened them all up. And now I'll have to do this every 7th cut, I think, is tighten up these screws. That's exactly what's happening in church right now, loose tight. There are some people with a screw loose. Had to throw that in. A screw loose. You know who they are. You know they're out there, and they need to be taught. And we need to teach ourselves this too. Let's tighten up the screws around the way we think, our heart condition, how we're teaching and preaching, what we're doing, how we're working with people needs to be all tightened up. Help people tighten stuff up, because at the moment there's a lot of loose stuff going on there. Could you imagine in this year, 2020, that there would be so much global stuff going on in the church through all the various issues that have come up in the last 7 months? I couldn't have imagined it would be that condensed in such a small space of time. And I'll tell you why. Too many loose things in our lives. And we have to keep things really tight. Let's move to the next one. The next one is performance measurement over performance-based Christianity. Performance-based Christianity is when I do something to appeal to God's love, or I do something for the church or whatever it might be, so that I find value and identity in doing that thing from the accolade or reward I get. But performance measurements are different to that. Performance measurements is where I measure something without thinking God loves me more, or they like me more, or that's my identity. And we have a big challenge. The Grace Message has dealt a lot with that. I think the Grace Message has helped a great deal move past performance-based Christianity. But there's still a lot of people that perform, hopefully, that God will like them more, or that their identity is shaped by the results they're getting, rather than just measuring what they're doing. Let's not drop measuring what we do. And if somebody came to me and said they have the ministry gift of an evangelist, the first question I might ask is, how many people came to Christ in your ministry? That would be an obvious question. Or I have a healing ministry, I heal the sick or whatever it might be. I'd ask, well, how many people have you? You'd ask for a measurement on what they believe they carry. I think what's happened sometimes is we have lost the ability to measure the things around us because we link it so much with who we are or how God sees us. And that's a big mistake. Even in the book of Acts, when the day of Pentecost came, there were 3,000 people added to the church. On the miracle of Peter, when the lame man was healed, there were 5,000 men added to the church. There was a measurement attached to every single thing God did. But that measurement didn't bring worth or value to the experience. It just showed what was happening. And so I don't know about you, but I do not like performance-based Christianity. Performance-based Christianity is where people trying to find their identity, worth, or value from doing something for God. But let's never forget measuring what's going on around about us. Now, in this day and age, when we talk about online stuff, it's very hard to do measurements because usually we compared measurements with 1 year over the other, 2019 against 2020. And now we can't do that because we're online and the numbers all change. But that doesn't mean we just stop measuring. We still have to know what is happening in some things and how we're looking at, and how we're doing in certain things, and we should still do that, but not to compare ourselves, not to compete with the guy down the road, not to feel how good we are, not to say, look at God's blessing on my life or whatever it might be, or God values me greater, but rather what we need to do is make sure that we just root ourselves in understanding that God wants us to do well in what we carry. I'll never forget this when I was running a Bible school in Australia. It was a fast-growing school, became one of the largest schools in Australia. And I was very young at that time, but it really took off. And one day I had about 10 staff working for me, and the finance person walked in and said, "We have no money." Now, in those days, we paid by cash in an envelope every week. It wasn't transferred to your bank account at the end of every month like we do now. It was cash in an envelope every week. And I said, well, just raid one of the savings accounts or whatever. No, we've got nothing. We've got zero. We can't pay the bills for the next month. Well, thanks for letting me know all about this now. Really appreciate knowing that. and they said, what are we going to do? The staff need to be paid today. And I was, so I said, I'm leaving the place. And I got in the car and drove right up the Dandenong Mountains. We were based in Melbourne. Went up to the Dandenong. I found a spot I could get out, and I yelled at God. Have you ever done that? Just God is not offended by our yelling at him, I've noticed. He actually quite likes it when we just vent. The best place to vent sometimes is with God. He doesn't get upset. He's not feeling orientated. It's not like, oh, that's it, mate. I'm not talking to you anymore, you mongrel. He just says, well, let's suck it up and move on. And I love that about God. He just takes it for what it is. I vented. I told him what I thought. I said to him, it's not right. I've done everything right. Why the heck is this wrong for me? What are you, that was performance-based Christianity. I sat down on a log, and the immediate thing that dropped in my spirit was, it's by grace, It's by grace, And it was like that seed just landed there. So I got back to work, and staff were all there. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I said, half of you are theologians. Don't you know it's by grace? Walked into my office. At that time, I really didn't understand what it meant, but I knew what it meant, if that makes sense. I hadn't worked it through as a process, but I knew what was being said. Anyway, so I get in the office, I'm sitting down. I told the people I didn't want to be disturbed, and I got a knock on the door in about an hour. And they walked in, and this is what they said. Got a guy out here, he's from overseas, and he wants to pay 4 years of his fees in advance. He's got the check ready to go, but he would like to know if we would give him a discount, small discount if he pays 4 years in advance. Now, this is an hour after I got back from this never happens. And I'm like, no, you tell him he can't have a discount. What do you reckon? I said, what does he want off his fees? We'll take it. And we gave him a discount. He paid his fees. Do you know, that whole afternoon, that was about 3 o'clock till 5 o'clock, we had probably 10 people walk in and do something very similar, because it's not performance-based Christianity. It's by grace and grace alone. And when we rest in that, there's a measurement that we use, and that measures how God is working, but it's not as a performance before God. Let's remind folks of that, because I think what's happening now a little possibly is people are starting to move away from, they don't want to be measured, they don't want to know about this, they don't, because it's all performance-based. And when we come back to church, it's just, let's do church and be this and be fluffy, really. I get that, but performance measurements trump performance-based Christianity. Let's move to the next one. Educated with the Spirit trumps feelings and emotion. Well, that's an easy one. Now, this one there, feelings and emotion, we have them, they're part of us, they're who we are, and they are genuine, and they are needful, and they are good every time. So you can't just wipe them away. You can't say they're not part of us, but they are not really part of guidance of the Holy Spirit. We use these words that actually are incorrect. We say things like, I feel God said, if that makes sense. And of course, that's leaning towards the emotional side. But being educated by the Spirit trumps feelings and emotions every time. When I first came to Denmark, as Stuart said, 25 years ago now, my wife and I came to be a part of what God was going to do in this part of the world, and we wanted to be a part of what was happening. So I looked around the church, and I figured out, in Europe at least, I don't know about UK, but certainly in Europe where I was, the problem wasn't demons or bad leadership and all this. You know what it was? Pharisaicalism. It was rife. Pharisees everywhere. So I preached for 5 years. Every message I preached was the spirit of the Pharisee, how to define one, how to see one. I got meetings closed down. I got translators walk off the platform. You have no idea, because the issue was not anything but this self-righteous Pharisaism, which I might add now has disappeared pretty much from the European church, because the Holy Spirit has moved on, and we've had the grace message come in, and it's helped people get through this. But I'm going to help you with this. The new message that we've got to counter today is feelings and emotions are more important than truth, or are my truth. If we're not careful, we will move within 10 to 20 years of a society of Christianity that is feeling and emotion based as their justification for truth. They will use those words, and so we have to help people get educated in the Spirit. We have to help them understand that they're very close. What you might feel and what you might sense is important, but you need to know the difference between this guy who we had down in at our meeting in Vienna. Actually, it was in August. I was telling you about the Nigerian man. He's a prophet, and he's an amazing prophet. He comes to Denmark every 6 months, and he has done for 20 years, and he's always invited back. It's an amazing thing when some prophets come in and they do their thing and run away, and you never see them. They drop their time bomb and off they go, and you're left picking up the pieces. That's not hard to do, and then run off. This guy doesn't. He and I watched him. I asked him to come because I trust him implicitly. He's a great guy, and I've watched him, and I know that he's reading what's going on. He knows God's speaking about certain things. And I said to him before he came, about 5 years ago, actually, before I invited him to this, I said to him, I noticed that you can pick things going on. God is speaking to you all the time, but you're not saying everything that God tells you. And he said, no, I don't get that. He said, I do not understand why people think when God says something, they have to automatically tell everyone what God said. He said, there's a couple of gifts in the list of gifts called knowledge and wisdom. They should pack themselves around every gift that's in operation, especially prophecy, because he's a prophet. He said we should have knowledge on one side and wisdom on the other side, because knowledge says, I don't need to say that now. Wisdom says, don't say it to that person now. Just because I know it doesn't mean I have to tell it. I don't know about you, but I get a little tired of those people who just blurt out everything they think God is telling them. But actually, many times it's just a feeling or an emotion rather than educated by the Spirit. To be educated by the Spirit is to understand what God is saying, pack it in wisdom and knowledge, and even good advice and so on, so that we actually build these gifts and make these gifts even more prevalent in our church, but in the right way. Now, that's really important, because I think one of the things we're going to have to help people with is being educated in the Spirit. And we need to do this under discipleship, because otherwise people will lean towards everything will be feeling and emotion-based, particularly when it comes to making decisions, which is another reason I wrote the book. Okay, let's move to the next one. Let's be theologically biblical, which trumps current events. What is it Spurgeon said? Prepare your messages with the Bible in one hand and a newspaper in the other. Seems to me like now we just prepare our messages with Facebook in front of us, And remember, Facebook is for people who can't face books. Just thought I'd say that. So it's almost like now we preach just current trends. We used to go from topical sermons, because we left expository sermons. We went to topical sermons, and now we've gone to current event sermons. Let's be careful to make sure we keep rooting ourselves back in the theologically biblical stuff, which doesn't mean you just have a text to remind you of what is happening in a trend, but you're exposing people to the text in a way that they can work it out, think it through. And if we teach them to think and not just inspire them, then we'll start to change the messages we produce, because we'll be looking at messages that have theological content rather than just inspirational content. And that makes a difference to what they're hearing and how they learn. Current trends are very important. Current trends are, and by the way, can I say this, of course, if you've watched closely current trends right now, it's the last days, and is the vaccine the mark of the beast and all this, because you can't get on an aeroplane. Well, I'm going to help you with this. You can't get on Qantas, but you can get on Ryanair. Ryanair have said, we'll take you anywhere without a vaccine. So I guess we'll all just be flying Ryanair. I don't know. But my point being that these are current events and people are getting locked into these. We still need that theologically, biblically strong sense of knowing what God is saying through his word. I want to move to another one here now. Trust over friendship. Trust over friendship. Do you know what I've heard in the last 7 months more than anything else, as I've talked to pastors who are picking up the pieces often of what's happening around them? This is what I hear, a sentence I hear a lot. And I thought those people were my friends. I thought they were my friends. And I started to think this through, and I thought, friends can walk away in a minute, but I'll tell you what they can't walk away from quickly. Trust. Trust is the missing component today in everywhere we go. Trust, if you build it, is the glue that will keep everyone stuck close together. Why? Because even in the church, we have a trust issue, don't we? Certainly in politics, we have a trust issue. In business, we're seeing trust issues. In Denmark, we've had a massive row of, we've had the, what do you call it, voted or said that our government in Denmark has been the most, one of the best governments around, that, you know, in the EU, it's very well regarded. In the last 4 months, we've had a hashtag Me Too, and 3 political leaders have gone. We've had a prime minister who broke the law to kill a whole lot of minks. I took my mink out the other day and somebody beat it with a stick. It was sad. But anyway, she killed 17 million minks against the law, still doing it against the law. She did the lockdown against her advisors and now tried to pass a law where everybody will be forced to take a vaccine in 4 months. Do you trust? What's going on with trust? Well, we have to build that in the church. Build friendship, but trust trumps friendship every time. 3 trusts you must build. Here they are. The first one is your personal trust. That is your character, who you are. You have to be the person where somebody says, I'll give them the key to my house. I'll let them look through my bank account. I'll let them examine all my stuff. I'll let them look after my kids and all of it. That's personal trust, number 1. That is top line for all of us. Sadly, that's the one, not sadly, that's the one we rely on mainly, but there's 2 more. The second one is called strategic trust. Strategic trust is where, as a leader, if you say you're going to do something, say in 5 years, 2 years, 1 year, or whatever it might be, you actually have to be able to do it. How many of you have met a leader you would trust implicitly, but often they'll say, here's my goal for the next year, and they just forget about it? Or reminiscent of part of the faith movement was, if you blab it enough or shout it enough or say it loud enough, it'll just happen. And that sort of way of doing things is not building trust. That's why we have the idea of underestimate, overperform. Underestimate, overperform. Meaning the idea that you let people, when you say you're going to do something, you know you're going to do it and you know you're going to get there. The third type of trust is called organizational trust. That means the little stuff gets done, the detail. So I can be good at setting goals and doing them, but I can also be really bad at just turning up to a meeting, or not answering your email, or not looking at the text, or not replying to something I needed to reply to. That's called organizational trust. And when that one's low, then everything's low. Leaders have to build all 3. When you build all 3 levels of trust, people find that much, because they're not going to find that level of trust if you've built it anywhere else. It's impossible to find. It's hard to find. As pastors, let's build our trust levels high and make sure that we build those 3 areas equal at the same time. Have you noticed with this generation, as it's coming through now very quickly, they're very good at personal trust, but their organizational trust is quite low. They don't turn up to meetings and they think it's okay, or they don't answer a test and that's okay. What they don't realize is they are, as a leader, is making a big mistake when it comes to building trust. And they can rely on their character all they like, but at the end of it all, people will be wondering, where is the other stuff? Build trust first. Here's the next one very quickly. Spiritual justice trumps social justice every time. Spiritual justice trumps social justice every time. We've heard a lot of this recently, and it's good. We have to do social justice, but we are in the business of spiritual justice. We're in the business of people getting right with God and then mapping it out from there, rather than getting society right and hoping they meet God. That is a liberal approach. It's not the best way to go. And liberal churches have been doing that for 100 years, and look where they are today. We're not that group. We believe in spiritual justice. Getting right with God affects the rest. And I can tell you, I know this to be true, because in terms of social justice, a church can only do so many things. They can only fill so many pots. They can only have enough money to do so many things. But in spiritual justice, we're told, go into all the world. And we can. We can actually touch many people anytime we want to, in any way. So our emphasis must be spiritual justice trumps social justice. Let's do social justice. Let's be involved in social justice. But let's not forget, the mission of the church is to win the lost, to allow them to meet Christ. We are called to make disciples. And that's an important thing right now, because there's been a slight shift and challenge on that one. The last one, not the last one, it should be the last one. Let's make it the last one. Ministry over volunteering. I don't know about you guys, but you might be experiencing some people saying to you they don't want to volunteer anymore. Tragedy this, I don't want to leave the team, I'm going to go do something else, I'm dropping out for this reason, that reason. We've heard a few of these things go on. And I think it's because our language has concentrated on a non-biblical idea called volunteering. Well, I'll help you with this one. Ministry trumps volunteering every time. If somebody says to you, I can't volunteer anymore, I don't want to volunteer anymore, I would propose the question something like this. What about your ministry? What about the ministry God's birthed in? Now, remember this, we can't give a ministry, we can't create a ministry, we can't tell them what their ministry is, but we can make opportunities for their ministry to flourish. Our job, Ephesians 4:11, as apostolic gifts, is to build up the body of Christ by releasing the ministries that are there. And volunteering is how we do it, but volunteering is not what we do. Actually, what we're doing is creating a life or an opportunity for people to minister, and they can do that through volunteering. I would still say, if somebody said to me, what's my ministry? I would say, go and volunteer somewhere and you'll discover what your ministry is. But I would never say, just go and volunteer, because that's what we do here. Our job is to build up the sense of understanding what their ministry is. More on that if we could. We can't. Last one very quickly, and everyone said, thank goodness. Getting it done right trumps ticking the box. Getting it done right trumps ticking the box. Let's not go back with our teams just ticking boxes of what we did in the past or how we did things before Corona. Now we just pull out the sheet and start ticking boxes. Let's get it done right. If there's things we need to adjust, and be creative about it, let's get it done right according to the biblical mandates and according to the way God has called us to do it in our thing. But we need our teams to get it right, just not tick the boxes. Well, the last few ones there, I've just gone through very quickly. There's a lot more to be said. But what I've tried to say today to all of you guys who are listening is, let's make sure we do recenter ourselves, especially on kingdom principles, on things like getting people to think things through, marination, on making sure that we tighten up the loose spots, that we talk about ministry and volunteering, but ministry is first, discovering what your ministry is, and that we help people get away from personal preference, and that we don't forget these mainstays of what we do. And I want to finish quickly before I hand it back to Stuart or whoever it may be with a prayer for you guys. And I want to thank you for listening, and I hope it's helped. And on Wednesday, we might be breaking this down a little further next week. But let me pray for you guys right where you are now as I close this. Lord, I thank you for these guys and these folks who are listening to me now. And I pray there's one or two things that are just like a little tweak that help them move things forward, that little area that they need to concentrate on changes, and it helps them move forward. I pray, Lord, that they would be ready for what is to come, because what is to come is better than what it was. What is to come is going to be greater than what it was. This is not the end of the church. This is the beginning of a whole new period of church life where we can really see all the work that we've done solidify down, become great foundation stones for the future. Bless them all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Fabulous. So good, Scott. If you can see the whole screen, why don't we just thank Scott just for being with us and sharing with us today. I mean, that was just incredible. 10 things. And I just want to encourage you, because Scott's a genius thinker, but he's also a provocative thinker. And I just want you to, some of those things, for some of us, we will resonate with and say, yeah, preach it, go for it, etc. That's not the ones we need to listen to. It's the ones that we challenge us, where I think, oh, I'm not quite sure about that. So if you had any of those points and you thought, I'm not quite sure about that, think about it. Think about it, because that's an opportunity for us all to grow. We only grow in environments of challenge and stretch. And there were certainly one or two things in there that I'll think about. But Scott, that was awesome. And I am so looking forward to being able next Wednesday. Scott's going to be able to come on about 10:30, not 11:30, 10:30 our time, 11:30 his time, into our Leaders National Forum. So make sure you get booked into that, and he's going to be on for the last 45 minutes or so, and we'll be able to dig in. If you've got any questions, send them into the office. If there's anything you'd like us particularly to talk to him about in response to that, you can do that. And so that's next Wednesday, which is going to be a fantastic time. Well, I hope you agree. I think that's been an incredible morning. So much input, and so thrilled. And great that we get to follow it up as well with the Leaders National Forum. Thank you again, Scott. Thank you so much for praying for us as well and investing into us. I also want to thank everyone who's given today into the offering. And if you're not